What's going on, guys? So today we're looking at three of the most popular compact fixed blade knives: the Becker BK11, the Becker BK14, and the Esee izula. I'm going to go over which one's going to be the best one for you, figure out which one you should buy, and why. Now, I'm going to cut to the chase on this one, and my official answer on which one you should buy is all three, because inevitably, that's probably what you're going to do in the first place. So this is more just which order you should going to figure out which one you're going to want to buy. So, starting off, I'm going to go with a little history on how these knives came to exist and why they're around today. So you're probably going to notice a very similar profile on a few of these things on these knives. And first off, the most obvious is going to be the blade on the two Beckers. So let's get these out of the wood here and go over a few things there. So first things first, looking at the blade shape on the two Beckers. Now, first thing is the blade is identical. The only difference being is this one is a smooth coat, this is a rougher coat that is covered in some burn marks from using it on a ferro rod in the past. So the reason you can see a difference in the coating is this is an older knife, this one's a little bit newer. This one has back when they still used the roll stamps on the Becker from KaBar. This one's a much newer iteration when they switched over to the laser etching and a rough coating. Really makes no difference for you. I find this one does wear a little faster, however it was a much smoother, easier to clean finish. It's really personal preference, but this is what's going to be available today with the rough finish and the laser etching. But you pretty much have to be a bit of a collector to really care about the difference there. Now, again, the blade is identical in these two. The only difference is the handle. The BK14 is a much more rounded, smooth finish handle. I did add the aftermarket, similar to the Ivory handles they use on the rest of the Becker series. And then I added the factory micarta scales to the BK11 to make it a little more comfortable. Of these two, I think it's really a toss-up which one to go with first. The one thing is this one does have a bottle opener, and they market this as a wire breaker right here. So you basically could put a piece of wire in, twist it back and forth, and break it off. For me, I'm never going to do that. It's more just in that you could do that in a pinch, but I've never really found a need to do so. So I call that a bit of a wash. They do market this as a neck knife where it is called the Becker Necker, as well as being known as the BK11. This one could be used as the same, but it's a little bit large in both cases to be used as a neck knife. I would argue that this is more of a small belt knife or something you'd toss in a pocket, put in a pack, something like that. The other similarity you're going to notice here is the handle profile between the Esee izula and the BK14. Now, if I didn't have these plastic scales on here, you'd notice they're pretty much identical, give or take a few minor differences in the overall cut, and that's such the way that these may not fit perfectly on this, and the handles that are made for the izula may not fit perfectly on the BK14. Now, from my understanding, the way this happened was a couple years back on blade forums, someone wanted basically this knife right here for the BK14, so they bought an izula, they bought a BK11, cut them both in half, and then welded on the blade from the Becker onto the Esee, and there basically created the BK11, and that went into production a couple years later and has been a success ever since. Now, as far as how you're going to find these to be useful, they're all great knives. You just need to figure out what's going to fit your use case you want for them. So if you're looking for the most compact profile, I'm going to say the izula is probably going to win out there because the overall length is the shortest of the bunch. So you get about half an inch or so shorter overall length than the BK11, and a very similar but probably closer to 3/4 of an inch shorter than the BK14. Not to mention, overall profile between them, they are all the same thickness of the blade, so there's no real difference there. But the big thing is, if you go the route of a stock izula or BK11 or BK14, yes, I said those backwards, is you need to figure out if you want to add an aftermarket handle or cord wrap them or just leave them as a skeletonized handle. For me, I don't typically like skeletonized handles because they do bite in. They're not a lot to grip onto, especially if you have larger hands. Now, for point of reference, I do wear size large gloves, and I have just enough meat on the handle here that I don't have to have it running out. I'm not kind of running short with the pinky. I do get a full grip into there. But it's not enough that it's going to cause any issues when you're cutting. You're able to get a good purchase on there and get good chunks of wood to go flying when you are carving off of there. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. So if it's light use only, you want it extra concealable, the izula is a great way to go. Another benefit is the factory sheath that comes with the izula is probably the best of all of them because it has great retention, it doesn't shake out of there, and in the version I bought, it even came with a pocket clip on there as well. It is pretty thick, however, in testing from what we've seen with these is that the material they're using on these sheaths is significantly better than what the old version of the Beckers used. However, they have made some updates in the past. The reason I say that is because if you're running this back and forth across that, I'm using the outside as an example, but when you run it inside and out of the sheath to put it in and take it out, it's going to rub the edge on the inside of that sheath. On the izula, it does not seem to be dulling that whatsoever. On the Beckers, however, the old style sheaths, which is what this one is, when you rub that back and forth, say 100 times, it will completely dull this edge. So that is why on this one, I'm still using that for one of these. Actually, this one goes to the 11. However, they came with the exact same sheath. I've stopped using it wherever possible. Now, the reason is that I've actually purchased an aftermarket sheath from a company called Esee. I believe that's the pronunciation, but it's actually a very nicely made aftermarket sheath with a thumb ramp, and it fits the BK14 perfectly. I've also added a tech lock to the back so you can actually use that as a belt clip. A little bit large for this knife, I will admit. However, it does work great, locks on securely, and that's not going to go anywhere. And the benefit is where it's 100% Kydex and it's not a glass reinforced nylon or something else, you can run that across there as much as you want. It's not going to dull it out. And that's going to be one of the biggest advantages to going to an aftermarket Kydex sheath. Now, on the more recent iterations of the Beckers, they have replaced the glass reinforced nylon to a newer mix that I believe has a lower glass content, and they've added an external lock here with a bit of a thumb lock to it. I've never seen one in person, but from my understanding is they don't dull the blades as bad because they're a softer plastic, which is why they had to add the external lock to make sure you still get the rigidity from it. So keep that in mind. If you go with the Beckers, I would say plan to add a Kydex sheath. With the izula, you're pretty much good to go as it sits, assuming you like the size and shape as it is. With all of them, I personally like the idea of adding a set of external scales, as I'm sure you've noticed with these two. But it's personal preference. Some people like this. Now, I will admit I have not tried adding external scales to the izula, and I have not seen some that will actually allow it to use the factory sheath. Others, you will need to switch that out with aftermarket Kydex or make your own. So that is something to consider when you do start adding more of the external parts, because as you notice right here, if I can get that to focus, you get a much larger profile here, which you need to compensate for with the sheath. Now, the one gripe I have about every one of these knives, but is not something to worry about because it's an easy fix, is that none of them, out of the box, can strike a ferro rod. But I'm sure you'll notice that both the BK11 and the BK14 have been filed down on the back of the spine so that they will strike one. I have not done that as of yet because this is still a fairly new knife for me. So, just for a quick example of what I'm referring to here, with the filed edge on the back, you can actually get a spark. Same thing, filed edge allows you to spark. I have not filed this edge. In this one, it still has the factory coating on the back, and it won't strike anything. So that is no-go for me, and I will be filing that down very shortly to make sure that's something that is not an issue for me, because the other way they're going to recommend is that you sacrifice a portion of your blade and scrape that way, which, yes, it works, but that's not for me because I don't want to destroy my edge trying to scrape a ferro rod. So, whichever one you go with, I do recommend filing down the edge of the spine. That way you can get a nice sharp 90-degree edge. So, with that in mind, all these are going to be great knives for you. The question becomes which one you should buy first, because at the end of the day, I do recommend you buy all of them. So, let me know in the comments section below which one do you guys like the best, which one do you buy first, or do you already have all of them? And if that is the case, which one do you like the best? And as always guys, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe.